Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today we're talking to Jennifer Stanford, who is Senior Director and Principal Consultant at Vitalief. Jen brings over 30 years of experience working across the clinical trial spectrum. And today we're going to be talking to her about site and trial activation. And our first topic is talking about what's really slowing down activation. And Jen has a ton of practical experience, so this will be a really good conversation. Jen, I'd like to just jump right into it.
Sure.
When you look at site activation across the industry, what consistently stands out as the biggest barrier to getting trials started on time?
So I would say, and this is not like some magic answer, but I would say it comes down to bandwidth at the site and having the right people in the right place that have the time to do the trial startup activities. It's a challenge at the site level, Monique, because there are so many things they're juggling. So, they don't have just a amount of time carved out to sit and work on starting new studies. They're working, with clinical teams, they're working on trials that are already going, they're working on renewals, amendments. So there's just a lot of pieces that have to be juggled at a site. So I think having the dedicated team to really sit and focus on getting a trial up and running is probably the biggest barrier for these sites.
And are there any early warning signs that tell you that a study is likely to hit activation delays?
So I think communication is probably the biggest issue across the board in so many aspects that we tend to, if a sponsor sends something to a site and they don't hear back from them in a week or more, that's probably a pretty big red flag that they don't have enough people to really focus on that new study that you've sent them.
Right.
And I think that would show you that you're going to have some slow activation times if you can't get a response back even from your initial email. And it kind of goes both ways because at the site side, when we send things to a CRO or a sponsor, say it's a draft consent form or a draft budget, if we're not getting a timely response for them, that probably means they also are having limited bandwidth to be able to get to that. So I think, communication is key for this success in all of this.
Sure. So in your experience, which parts of activation may look simple on paper but tend to fall apart in practice?
Well, that's a good question. If I was to say the biggest thing, I think it's really the budgets. I think that, people think a budget is pretty easy to do because you usually have a template that you're starting from. But it really, every site is different, and every site has their own set of fees and justifications for why they need certain things. So it gets difficult when you get too many cooks in the kitchen because you can have the site going to bat for what they feel like they need. You have the CRO who's in the middle trying to get the site to come down on their budget because they're looking out for the sponsor's best interest. And then they have to escalate it. Sometimes within a CRO, it has to be escalated to their lead before it can ever get escalated to the sponsor. So it's a cumbersome process and it can be somewhat of a game, honestly. Anyone who's been in this business knows, you go back and forth, two, maybe three rounds until you can land on a number that everybody can live with.
Right.
I think if we could expedite that process and be very transparent in our budgets and our needs at each site, I think we could. I mean, the amount of money that we save negotiating these budgets sometimes is so minute that we spend more money trying to negotiate them than we would if we would have just agreed to those prices on the front end. So, I think that's an area that, we really could do some work on. I
Sure.
also think technology is going to come into play very soon that's going to help negotiate these budgets faster. So I think we'll see
Sure.
that coming in the next year.
So Why do you think those issues keep happening, even across like sites and sponsors that are pretty experienced?
I think there's a lot of attrition in this industry, and there's a lot of new people coming in to the groups, both at the site, the CRO, and the sponsor. So a lot of times you're starting from scratch and, trying to build out these budgets and have these conversations. So I think if there was a little bit more consistency and you had the same people with good experience negotiating these back and forth, you would know when to escalate things and, not just be so black and white about every number when it comes to doing the budget.
And is there a misconception that you often hear about why activation is slow, something that you wish the industry understood better?
I really think it's the handoff, Monique. What happens is everyone gets so busy in their day-to-day jobs that when you get something back, it basically goes in your stack of to-dos. And, you know, depending on how busy you are or what the bandwidth is within your department, it may take you a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to get back to that. And every time you have these long delays and you have to go back and like refamiliarize yourself, reread the contract, reread the comments. What did they say they needed? If you could do this in a timely fashion as you move through the process, you would cut down on so much of the rereading and re engaging with budgets, contracts, consent form drafts. It really is in so many aspects. If we can just move it along faster, we would save a lot of time on the back end.
Yeah, makes total sense. Jen, thank you so much. Appreciate your time talking about the challenges of site and trial activation.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.